Free will, truth or illusion. Hello everyone. Today we will explore one of the most fundamental questions of human existence. Does free will actually exist? Or is it a concept that humans merely imagine? This question has captivated philosophers, theologians, and scientists for thousands of years, and it lies at the core of our understanding of identity and responsibility. The concept of free will. We make countless decisions every day. What to eat in the morning, what clothes to wear, what work to do. The question of whether these decisions are truly made freely, or whether they are already determined by factors we are not aware of, is at the heart of the free will debate. What is free will? In its most basic definition, it refers to the ability to choose for oneself without external coercion or predetermined factors. When we choose between A and B, we believe we can freely select one of the two possibilities. But you have no idea how deep a philosophical rabbit hole this simple definition leads us into. Are we really choosing freely? Or is it just an illusion created by our brains? Philosophical perspectives. The philosophical debate on free will can be divided into three main positions. First, libertarianism. The philosophical position on free will, not the political ideology. This position argues that humans can make truly free choices in a meaningful sense. Our decisions are not completely determined by past events or laws of nature, and we have the ability to act differently, even in identical situations. But isn't this claim a bit ridiculous? If all matter in the universe moves according to physical laws, why would the human brain be an exception? Libertarians seem to suggest that there is a small magician hiding in our brains that transcends the laws of physics. Second, determinism. This view holds that all events in the universe are determined by a causal chain of previous events. If you made a decision yesterday, it was the inevitable result of numerous factors, including your past experiences, genetic factors, environmental influences, and so on. Determinists say that the feeling that our choices are free is merely an illusion. If we decided to drink coffee, it was already determined by our past experiences, genes, current situation, etc., and we could not have chosen otherwise. Interestingly, modern physics quantum mechanics suggest that the universe may not be deterministic at the microscopic level. But whether this provides us with free will is a separate issue. If quantum indeterminism affects our decisions, it would only mean that our choices are random, not that they are free. Randomness and freedom are not the same thing. Third, compatibilism. This position argues that free will and determinism can coexist. Even if our actions are determined by previous causes, we are still free in a meaningful way. Compatibilists redefine free will as the ability to act according to one's desires and values without external coercion. For example, if you chose to drink coffee, even if that choice was determined by your past experiences and current desires, if no one held a gun to your head and forced you, it is still a free choice. To be honest, compatibilism sometimes seems like philosophical acrobatics to save our intuitions about free will. It's like saying, you are free, but in fact, everything is determined. But this subtle position might also align better with our actual experience. Scientific evidence. Modern science, especially neuroscience, provides interesting evidence for the free will debate. In the 1980s, Benjamin Libet performed a groundbreaking experiment. He instructed subjects to move their wrists and then measured their brain activity and the time of conscious decision. Surprisingly, neural activity called readiness potential was observed in the brain about 200 to 500 milliseconds before the subjects consciously decided to move their wrists. This result was shocking. Before we consciously make a decision, our brain is already making that decision. It seemed as if our consciousness was simply approving decisions that our brain had already made. In more recent research, scientists at the University of Freiburg were able to predict whether a subject would press the left or right button up to 7 seconds before they decided, using fMRI scans. 7 seconds is a very long time from the perspective of conscious thought. These research findings suggest the possibility that our conscious choices may already be determined by unconscious processes in the brain. What we feel as free choice might just be an illusion created by our brains. But these studies also have limitations. Most experiments focus on simple actions like moving a wrist or pressing a button. There may be significant differences between such simple actions and moral dilemmas or important life decisions. Also, the fact that brain activity begins before we consciously make a decision does not completely negate the existence of free will. There are claims that the conscious self can exercise a veto power over the brain's unconscious processes. That is, even if the brain initiates an action, the conscious self can stop it. Nevertheless, scientific evidence poses serious challenges to the traditional concept of free will. If our choices are determined by past causes, are we truly free? Religious perspectives. Free will also holds an important place in religious thought. In Christianity, free will is viewed as an important gift that God gave to humans. Just as Adam and Eve could choose whether to eat the fruit of knowledge, humans can freely choose between good and evil and take responsibility for that choice. But an interesting contradiction arises here. If God is omnipotent and knows everything, He would already know what choices we will make. So can we really choose freely? This creates the age-old paradox in theology of God's omnipotence and human free will. Buddhism emphasizes the concept of karma rather than free will. Our current situation is the result of past actions, and our current actions will influence the future. Buddhism does not view there as being complete free will, but it does see that we have the ability to improve our karma and move toward a better life direction. In Islam, there is a concept called qadar. This means God's predestination, but at the same time acknowledges human free will and responsibility. The Quran has a verse that says, "Indeed, Allah will not change the condition of a people until they change what is in themselves." From a religious perspective, free will is the foundation of moral responsibility. If we cannot truly choose freely, can we be held responsible for our actions? Concepts such as heaven and hell, the law of karma, etc., are all built on the premise that we freely choose and take responsibility for the consequences. Practical approach. The philosophical, scientific, and religious debates about free will are very interesting, but how should we approach this issue in everyday life? Realistically, whether we have free will or not, we have no choice but to make choices. Every morning, we have to decide what clothes to wear, what to eat, what work to do. Even if these decisions were predetermined by past causes, we have to act as if we choose freely without knowing it. In fact, there are practical reasons for believing in free will. People who believe in free will tend to make better choices. According to one study, people who were induced not to believe in free will acted more dishonestly, showed less altruistic behavior, and displayed more aggressive behavior. This is probably because believing in free will increases personal responsibility. When we feel responsible for our choices, we make decisions more carefully and try to act more ethically. Also, belief in free will gives meaning and purpose to our lives. If we are merely machines moving according to physical laws, what meaning would our choices and actions have? Believing in free will gives moral weight and value to our lives. However, there is also comfort in a deterministic perspective. If everything is determined by previous causes, so are our failures and mistakes. We could not have acted differently, so we don't need to criticize ourselves too harshly. Deterministic thinking also makes us value our surrounding environment more. If our choices are heavily influenced by past experiences and environment, we need to create a better environment to make better choices. Specific examples. To understand the free will debate more concretely, let's look at a few examples. Example 1. Addiction. Addiction presents an interesting case for free will. Addicts often appear unable to control their behavior. Alcoholics often decide not to drink but end up drinking again. Does this indicate an absence of free will? Or does free will exist, but is weakened by the powerful force of addiction? From a neuroscientific perspective, addiction alters the brain's reward system, creating a strong desire for the addictive substance. These changes make it difficult to exercise free will, even if it exists. But many addicts recover through treatment. Does this suggest the existence of free will to some extent? Or is it simply that new environmental factors, treatment, support groups, etc., have changed how the brain works? Example 2. Crime and punishment. The criminal justice system largely assumes the existence of free will. Criminals are punished because they chose not to act differently when they could have. However, neuroscientific research shows associations between criminal behavior and dysfunction in certain parts of the brain, such as the frontal lobe. There is also evidence that environmental factors such as childhood trauma, poverty, abuse, etc., greatly increase the likelihood of criminal behavior. If a criminal's behavior is largely determined by their brain structure and past experiences, can we hold them fully responsible? Did they truly have the freedom to act differently? This is not merely a philosophical question. It has practical implications for how our society views and responds to crime. Example 3. Artificial intelligence and free will. The advancement of artificial intelligence technology raises new questions about free will. Artificial intelligence systems make decisions based on programmed algorithms and data. This is clearly deterministic. However, the latest AI systems show surprising complexity and unpredictability. For example, AlphaGo plays Go in ways that human programmers did not anticipate. If AI develops further in the future and reaches a level similar to human intelligence, could they also have free will? Or are they just very complex deterministic systems? This question depends on how we define free will. If free will is simply a decision based on complex internal processes, AI could have free will. But if free will requires something that transcends physical causality, neither AI nor humans would have free will. Biblical perspective. What does the Bible say about free will? Throughout the Bible, we can see an emphasis on human choice and responsibility. In Genesis, God gave Adam and Eve a choice. Genesis 2:16-17 says, "You are free to eat from any tree in the garden, but you must not eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, for when you eat from it, you will certainly die." This means they had the freedom to obey or disobey. In Joshua 24:15, Joshua declared to the Israelites, "Choose for yourselves this day whom you will serve." This clearly assumes freedom of choice. In the New Testament, Jesus said in Matthew 7:13-14, "Enter through the narrow gate, for wide is the gate and broad is the road that leads to destruction, and many enter through it. But small is the gate, and narrow the road that leads to life, and only a few find it." This passage suggests that humans can choose their spiritual destiny. However, the Bible also speaks of God's sovereignty and predestination. For example, in Romans 8:29, Paul wrote, "For those God foreknew, he also predestined to be conformed to the image of his Son, that he might be the firstborn among many brothers and sisters." These passages raise complex questions about the relationship between human free will and God's sovereignty, theologians have offered various interpretations of this issue. Some argue that God gave humans true free will, but foreknew the consequences of their choices. Others say that God predestined everything but made humans feel as if they choose freely. Whatever interpretation you take, the Bible clearly emphasizes human responsibility. We must take responsibility for our choices and bear the consequences. In conclusion, the Bible acknowledges the complex relationship between free will and God's sovereignty while teaching that we should live as if we choose freely. In Romans 14:12, Paul emphasizes the importance of personal responsibility by saying, "So then, each of us will give an account of ourselves to God." Conclusion. Does free will actually exist, or is it a concept that humans merely imagine? There is no final answer to this question yet. Philosophers, scientists, and theologians are still debating this issue. Scientific evidence shows that our decisions are heavily influenced by unconscious processes in the brain. Philosophical arguments suggest that the concept of free will itself may be contradictory. However, religious perspectives, especially the Bible, emphasize the importance of human choice and responsibility. Perhaps the most practical approach is to take the perspective expressed in Proverbs 16:9. In their hearts, humans plan their course, but the Lord establishes their steps. That is, we take responsibility for our choices while acknowledging that there is a bigger plan. Also, 2 Corinthians 3:17 says, "Now the Lord is the Spirit, and where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is freedom." This suggests that true freedom comes not from the mere absence of physical constraints, but from a spiritual dimension. In the end, the answer to the question of free will can be found in the words of the Bible. It contains deeper spiritual truths that cannot be resolved simply by the laws of the physical world or philosophical debates. Whether we have free will or not, we should live as if we can choose freely. And we should take responsibility for those choices and strive to make better decisions. That is the wisdom that the Bible teaches us. Thank you sincerely for exploring the complex topic of free will with me today. This question has no simple answer, but it makes us think deeply about human nature and the meaning of our lives. If you want to explore more philosophical and theological topics, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. We provide content that stimulates your intellectual curiosity with new topics every week. Pressing like and subscribe will be a great help in producing more content. I'll see you in the next episode. I hope your day is filled with peace and wisdom.